Ever feel like you're constantly swimming upstream, like life just keeps piling more on and you're barely keeping your head above water?
Yeah, I hear that a lot, that sense of overwhelm. It almost becomes like the background noise of everyday life for so many people.
Exactly. And I think deep down, what most of us crave is that feeling of, well, peace, you
Yeah.
know, that calm amidst the chaos.
That peaceful mind everyone's always talking about.
Right. So today we are going deep, folks. We're diving into The Peaceful Mind Compass by James Grouder. This book is our roadmap, our source material for figuring out, well, what actually works when it comes to, feeling good.
Right, because we all know those quick fixes, those do this one thing and all your problems will vanish promises, they just don't cut it. Mental well-being, it's a journey, not a destination.
100%. And what I really appreciate about Grouder's approach is that he gives you actual tools. He calls them mental health hacks, which I admit at first I thought was a bit gimmicky, but these are actually evidence-based strategies, backed by neuroscience, psychology, the real deal.
Yeah, he doesn't just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. He's really grounded in the science of well-being.
And the best part is, he explains it in a way that anyone can understand. You don't need a PhD in brain science to get it. He's got this whole compass metaphor, right?
Oh, yeah, I love that.
So he says, being self-aware is like knowing exactly where you stand on the map. And a peaceful mind, that's your North Star, your desired direction. And the hacks, those are the tools, the compass, the strategies you use to get there.
It's such a good visual because it really highlights that it's an ongoing process, right? You're not just passively following a set path. You're actively navigating, constantly making adjustments, like checking your compass, making sure you're still on course.
Totally. So today we're hitting the highlights, the key waypoints, if you will. We'll be touching on everything from self-awareness, that starting point, to finding those anchors in the present moment, like being mindful, grounding yourself. We'll talk about how to deal with that inner critic we all have, that voice that just loves to bring you down.
Oh, that inner critic. We all know that one too well.
Right. And of course, we'll dig into emotional regulation because, let's be honest, sometimes those emotions can feel like a runaway train. And we'll look at practical strategies for dealing with stress, cultivating a more positive mindset, and, even those basic things like sleep, movement, and nutrition.
It's all connected. Can't have a peaceful mind without a healthy body.
Exactly. And we'll look at resilience, that ability to bounce back from challenges, because life is going to throw curveballs no matter how peaceful your mind is.
Through that.
Now, Grouder does a fantastic job of debunking some common myths along the way. We'll touch on those as we go. And while we won't be doing every single exercise from the book, we'll definitely give you the gist, the key takeaways, so you can start applying these ideas in your own life. He even provides all the scientific references in APA format, which I love because it's all based on solid research.
Yeah, none of that fluffy, unsubstantiated stuff. This is the real deal.
So bottom line, folks, this is about you taking control. It's about giving you a toolbox, equipping you with the knowledge and skills to understand and navigate your own inner world.
And ultimately create more peace within yourself.
Exactly. So with that in mind, let's jump right in. Our first stop on this journey, self-awareness.
The foundation, the starting point. You can't really go anywhere if you don't know where you are to begin with.
Right. So let's define it. What exactly is self-awareness in a way that actually makes sense?
Well, think of it like this. Self-awareness is the ability to tune into yourself, like really paying attention to your thoughts, feelings, those patterns you fall into, the things that set you off, all that good stuff.
And I think this is crucial, it's not about judgment, right? It's not about beating yourself up for having certain thoughts or feeling certain things. It's more about observing with curiosity.
Absolutely. It's like you're becoming a scientist of your own inner world. You're observing, taking notes, but not judging the data.
And this is where the neuroscience gets super interesting, right? Grouder talks about the medial prefrontal cortex, the MPFC. This part of your brain is heavily involved in self-reflection. And guess what? When you actively practice self-awareness, you're actually strengthening the connections in this region.
Yeah, it's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. And a stronger MPFC means you're better able to, understand yourself, process your emotions, make sense of your experiences.
Right. And then there's the insula. Now, this part of the brain is all about interoception.
Interoception? What's that?
Okay, so interoception is basically your body's way of giving you information about what's going on inside. Like that feeling of butterflies in your stomach before a presentation or that tightness in your chest when you're anxious. It's your body's way of talking to you.
Oh, so it's like those physical sensations that often go hand in hand with our emotions.
Exactly. And Gratter says that ignoring these signals is like, well, sailing without a compass.
Makes sense. If you're not paying attention to those internal cues, you're kind of flying blind.
Right. So how do we actually get better at this whole self-awareness thing?
Well, Gratter gives us some practical hacks, and the first one is the mood and energy log.
The daily weather report, he calls it.
I like that. So basically, you take a few moments each day, maybe 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night, and you just jot down how you're feeling, like on a scale of 1 to 10, or even just using descriptive words, happy, sad, stressed, whatever. And you also rate your energy level.
And this is where the why comes in, right? Gratter says it's not enough to just track how you feel. You also want to track what might be influencing those feelings.
Exactly. So, did you sleep well? Did something happen at work that's stressing you out? Did you have a fight with your partner? Did you eat a giant bag of chips for lunch? All these things can impact how you feel.
Right. It's like becoming a detective of your own inner world.
Totally. And the cool thing is, as you do this consistently, patterns start to emerge. You might realize that, every time I have a late night work deadline, I wake up feeling anxious the next day. Or maybe you notice that certain foods make you feel sluggish, while others give you energy.
Right. It's taking those vague feelings of like, ugh, I feel off, and turning them into concrete insights.
Exactly. And once you have those insights, you can start making changes. Maybe you set boundaries around work emails after dinner, or you swap out that sugary breakfast for something more nourishing.
So the mood and energy log. Super simple, but powerful. And Gratter recommends using whatever works for you, whether it's a notebook, a spreadsheet, or even an app. There are tons of them out there.
Oh yeah, there's an app for everything these days.
Right. The key is just doing it consistently. And after about a week of tracking, he suggests doing a little pattern spotting exercise.
Pattern spotting, what's that?
So it's basically taking some time to reflect on the data you've collected and asking yourself some key questions. Like, what connections are you seeing between your mood, your energy, and things like your sleep, your activities, the people you interact with? Are there certain times of day or days of the week when you consistently feel better or worse? And what activities seem to boost your mood and energy, and which ones drain you?
Makes sense. It's like you're analyzing your own personal data to figure out what works for you and what doesn't.
Exactly. Now, another key aspect of self-awareness is something Gratter calls trigger identification. He even calls it mapping your personal minefield, which I thought was a great analogy.
Yeah, that's a good one. So what exactly are triggers?
Triggers are basically those specific situations, thoughts, people, or even sensations that reliably provoke strong negative emotions in you. Like anxiety, anger, sadness, anything that really throws you off balance.
Okay, so if someone cuts you off in traffic and you feel that surge of road rage, that's a trigger.
Exactly. Or maybe it's a certain topic that always sparks an argument with your partner, or a specific thought that sends you spiraling into self-doubt.
Got it. And why is it so important to identify these triggers?
Because once you know what your triggers are, you can start to manage them more effectively. You can anticipate them, prepare coping strategies, and in some cases, even avoid or modify your exposure to them.
So it's like being aware of the landmines so you can carefully navigate around them.
Exactly. It takes away that element of surprise and gives you a sense of control.
Makes sense. So how do we go about figuring out what our triggers are?
Well, Gratter suggests a simple technique: mental rewind. So let's say you notice a sudden shift in your mood, or you feel a wave of anxiety or anger coming on.
Yeah.
You want to pause and think, okay, what was happening right before I started feeling this way? And be specific. Was it a thought, a conversation, a physical sensation, something you saw on social media?
Oh, so it's like tracing your steps back to the source of the emotion.
Exactly. And he suggests keeping a trigger tracker to jot down these triggers as you notice them. It could be part of your mood and energy log or a separate list.
Okay, so let's say I notice I feel super anxious every time I check my work email after dinner. That would go on my trigger tracker.
Yep. And then, armed with that knowledge, you can start to think, okay, how can I manage this? Maybe you set a rule for yourself. No work emails after 7 p.m. Or maybe you create a relaxing ritual after dinner to help you unwind and counter that anxiety.
So it's not just about being aware of the triggers. It's about using that awareness to make positive changes.
Exactly. Now, the third self-awareness hack Gratter introduces is all about listening to your body. He calls it your physical barometer.
Oh, interesting. So this is about paying attention to those physical sensations we talked about earlier, the ones that often accompany our emotions.
Exactly. Gratter points out that your body often registers emotions before you're even consciously aware of them, like that tightness in your chest, that knot in your stomach. Those are your body's early warning signs that something's up.
So it's like our body is giving us a heads up, but we're not always listening.
Right. We're so focused on our thoughts, our to-do list, all the external noise, that we tune out those subtle internal signals.
Makes sense. So what kind of physical sensations should we be paying attention to?
Groder recommends regularly scanning your body for things like tension, in your jaw, shoulders, neck, back. Notice how you're breathing. Is it shallow and rapid or deep and slow? Pay attention to your stomach, headaches, even changes in temperature. Do you suddenly feel hot or cold?
Okay, so we're basically becoming more attuned to those subtle physical cues. And then what?
Then, the key is to start connecting the dots, to link those physical sensations to your emotional state. So you might notice that every time you feel anxious, your chest tightens and your breathing becomes shallow. Or maybe you realize that when you're stressed, you tend to clench your jaw.
And once you make those connections, you can start to use that information to your advantage, right?
Exactly. Because now you're not just waiting for the emotion to hit you full force. You're catching it early, in those subtle physical signs. And that gives you a chance to intervene, to use those calming techniques we'll talk about later, before things escalate.
So it's like preventative maintenance for your mental health.
I like that. Now, before we move on, Grouder takes a moment to clear up a common misunderstanding about self-awareness.
Okay, what's that?
So a lot of people think that being self-aware means constantly analyzing and judging yourself, which, let's be honest, doesn't sound very fun.
Yeah, no one wants to live under a microscope all the time.
Right. But Grouder stresses that true self-awareness is about observation without judgment. It's about being curious, not critical. It's about understanding, not self-flagellation.
So it's more about compassion than criticism.
Exactly. It's about approaching yourself with kindness and curiosity, even those parts of yourself you might not like. Because even just acknowledging those negative traits is the first step towards potentially changing them. And that, in itself, is an act of self-care.
Makes sense. So to recap, self-awareness is the foundation. It's about being present with your thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations without judgment. It's about understanding those patterns and triggers, and it's an ongoing process.
Right. It's not a one-time thing. It's a skill you continue to develop and refine over time. And it's the essential first step towards navigating your way to a more peaceful mind.
Okay, so now that we've got our bearings, what's next?
Well, now that we're more aware of our internal landscape, it's time to talk about anchoring ourselves in the present moment. Because, as Grotto points out, our minds have this annoying tendency to wander.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like my mind is a wild monkey, swinging from one thought to the next, rarely staying put.
Right. We're either ruminating about the past, rehashing old hurts and regrets, or worrying about the future, fretting over things that haven't even happened yet. And all this mental time travel, it's exhausting. It takes us away from the only moment we truly have control over, the present.
Yeah, I know that feeling. So how do we rein in that wild monkey mind and stay more grounded in the now?
Well, that's where mindfulness and grounding techniques come in. Think of them as anchors that can help you steady yourself amidst the mental storm.
Okay, so mindfulness, grounding techniques, what's the difference?
So mindfulness, in a nutshell, is about paying attention to the present moment, on purpose, non-judgmentally. It's not about emptying your mind, which is a common misconception. It's more about directing your attention to whatever you're experiencing right now, whether it's your breath, your body, your senses, your thoughts, your feelings, whatever. And the key is to just observe these experiences without getting carried away by them.
Okay, so it's like being aware of what's happening in your mind and body, but not letting yourself get swept away by it.
Exactly. Grounding techniques, on the other hand, are more specific methods you can use to quickly reconnect with the present moment, especially when you're feeling really overwhelmed, anxious, or disconnected.
So, like, if you're having a panic attack or you're spiraling into worry, these are tools you can use to bring yourself back down to earth.
Exactly. And they often involve engaging your senses. So you might focus on the feeling of your feet on the ground, or the sounds around you, or the taste of a piece of candy.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's like shifting your attention away from those internal storms and focusing on something concrete in the external world.
Right. And the science behind this is really fascinating. Grouder talks about how mindfulness practices have been shown to reduce activity in the amygdala, which is that part of your brain that's responsible for the fight or flight response, the fear center, if you will.
Oh, wow. So it actually calms down that alarm system in our brain?
Yep. And at the same time, it increases activity and connectivity in the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that's responsible for things like emotional regulation, decision-making, and impulse control.
So mindfulness is like giving your brain a workout, strengthening those areas that help you stay calm and in control.
Exactly. And grounding techniques work by diverting your attention away from those overwhelming thoughts and feelings and focusing it on something more tangible, which helps to interrupt those negative thought patterns and gives your emotional brain a break.
Okay, I'm definitely on board with this. So what are some practical ways we can start incorporating these techniques into our lives?
Well, Grouder gives us a whole toolbox of anchoring hacks, and the first one is the breath anchor. He calls it your portable calm because, your breath is always with you.
Makes sense. So how does breathing help us feel calmer?
So breathing influences your autonomic nervous system,
Yeah.
which is the system that controls things like your heart rate, blood pressure, and digestion. When you're stressed or anxious, your sympathetic nervous system kicks in, activating that fight or flight response.
Right, so that's when we feel that surge of adrenaline, our heart starts racing, our palms get sweaty, all that fun stuff.
Exactly. But by focusing on your breath, you can actually activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the rest and digest response. It's like hitting the brakes on that stress response.
Okay, I'm liking this already. So how do we actually do this breath anchor thing?
Well, Grouder suggests a couple of techniques. One is called box breathing. It's super simple. You breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4, hold your breath for a count of 4, breathe out slowly through your mouth for a count of 4, and then hold your breath again for a count of 4. And you just repeat this cycle.
Okay, so it's like drawing a box with your breath. I can visualize that.
Exactly. The other technique he recommends is called 4-7-8 breathing. This one's a little different. You start by exhaling completely through your mouth, making a whooshing sound. Then you close your mouth and inhale quietly through your nose for a count of 4. Hold your breath for a count of 7, and then exhale completely through your mouth again, making that whooshing sound for a count of 8. And that's one complete breath.
Okay, so inhale for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. Got it.
Right. And Grouder suggests doing a few rounds of either of these techniques whenever you're feeling stressed or anxious. He even suggests setting a timer for 2 minutes and just focusing on your breath for that short period, noticing how you feel before and after.
I'm definitely going to try that. 2 minutes. That's doable.
Right. It's a super simple but surprisingly effective way to calm your nervous system and bring yourself back to the present moment.
Okay, what's the next anchoring hack?
This one's called the 5-4-3-2-1 grounding technique. Grouder calls it a sensory SOS.
Sensory SOS sounds intense.
It's actually super simple, but it can be incredibly helpful when you're feeling really overwhelmed, panicky, or disconnected from reality.
Okay, so like if you're having a full-blown panic attack, this is a tool you can use.
Exactly, and it works by engaging all 5 of your senses. So the idea is to pause, take a moment, and consciously identify 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste.
Okay, so like right now I can see my computer screen, my microphone, the bookshelf, the lamp, and my coffee cup. I can touch my keyboard, my chair, my pants, and my hair. I can hear the hum of the computer, the traffic outside, and my own breathing. I don't really smell anything distinct right now, but I can imagine the smell of fresh-baked cookies. And for taste, I can still taste the coffee I had earlier.
Perfect. See? Simple but effective.
And why does this work? Why does focusing on our senses help us feel grounded?
Well, for one thing, it pulls your attention away from those racing thoughts and anxious feelings and directs it to something concrete in the present moment. It's like interrupting that negative mental chatter and bringing your focus back to reality. And it also activates different neural pathways in your brain, giving your emotional circuits a break.
So it's like giving your overwhelmed brain a little vacation.
Exactly. Now, the final anchoring hack Grouder talks about is mindful moments. This isn't about formal meditation, although that can be helpful too. It's about weaving moments of presence into your everyday activities.
Oh, I like that. So it's not just something you do on a meditation cushion. It's something you can do anywhere, anytime.
Exactly. Grouder suggests choosing a routine activity, something you do every day, like brushing your teeth, washing dishes, making a cup of coffee, even walking to your car. And then, instead of doing it on autopilot, you do it with full conscious awareness.
So instead of mindlessly scrubbing the dishes while I'm mentally replaying that awkward conversation I had earlier, I actually pay attention to the feel of the warm water on my hands, the soapy bubbles, the sound of the water running.
Exactly. Engage all your senses. Notice the colors, the textures, the sounds, the smells, the tastes. And as you do this, you might find that even mundane tasks can become surprisingly enjoyable.
That's cool. So it's like bringing a little bit of mindfulness to those everyday moments.
Right. And as you practice this, it becomes easier to access that mindful state whenever you need it, whether you're feeling stressed, anxious, or just a little disconnected.
Okay, so we've got breath anchor, sensory SOS, and mindful moments. Got it.
Now, before we move on, are there any common myths about mindfulness that we should clear up?
Oh, definitely. One big one is that mindfulness means having a blank mind, which, let's be honest, is pretty much impossible for most of us.
Yeah, my mind is never blank. There's always something going on up there.
Right. But Grouder explains that mindfulness isn't about stopping your thoughts altogether. It's about noticing those thoughts, those feelings, those sensations, without getting carried away by them. It's like watching clouds pass by in the sky. They come, they go, and you just observe them without judgment.
Makes sense. Another myth I often hear is that you have to meditate for hours every day to get any benefits from mindfulness.
Yeah, that's a big one. And it can be really discouraging for people who are just starting out. But Grouder emphasizes that even short, consistent mindful moments, like the hacks we just talked about, can have a significant impact on your well-being.
So it's not about how long you do it, it's about doing it regularly. Exactly. Consistency is key. Okay, so to sum up this section on anchoring, mindfulness and grounding techniques are all about developing that ability to bring yourself back to the present moment, to that place of calm and stability within yourself. They're like mental anchors that can help you weather those internal storms.
Okay, anchors. Got it. Now let's talk about something I know we all struggle with. That inner critic.
Oh yeah, that voice in our heads that just loves to point out our flaws and tell us we're not good enough. It's like having a constant stream of negativity on repeat.
And it can be so discouraging, right? It saps your motivation, makes you doubt yourself, and just generally brings you down.
Totally. And what's frustrating is that it often feels like that inner critic is always louder than the voice of encouragement and self-compassion.
Yeah, it's like that negative voice has a megaphone and the positive voice is whispering.
Exactly. So in this chapter, Grouder gives us some practical strategies for taming that inner critic, for turning down the volume on that negativity, and amplifying the voice of kindness and self-acceptance.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me everything.
All right, so first things first. Grouder acknowledges that the inner critic isn't all bad. It often comes from a place of trying to protect us or motivate us to do better.
Okay, so it's not necessarily malicious. It's just like misguided.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that overprotective parent who's constantly warning you about all the dangers in the world, even when you're perfectly capable of handling yourself.
I can see that. So the goal isn't to silence the inner critic completely. It's to learn to manage it, to recognize when its messages are helpful and when they're just plain hurtful.
Right. It's about having a more balanced and realistic internal dialogue. And Grouder introduces this idea of cognitive reframing, which is basically a fancy way of saying that you're changing the way you think about things.
Okay, so we're changing the script, rewriting those negative thought patterns.
Exactly. And the science behind this is super cool. Grouder talks about how our thoughts influence our emotions and behaviors, which is one of the fundamental principles of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Right, I've heard of CBT. So the idea is that if we can change our thoughts, we can change how we feel and act.
Exactly. And Grouder explains how those automatic negative thoughts, the ones that just pop into our heads without us even realizing it, they're often distorted. They're not an accurate reflection of reality.
So, like, if I think I'm such a failure, I can't do anything right, that's a distorted thought.
Most likely, yes. Because, let's be honest, no one is a complete failure at everything. And Grouder lists a few common cognitive distortions, like black and white thinking, where you see things in extremes with no middle ground.
So, like, if I mess up one presentation at work, I automatically think I'm a terrible public speaker, even though I've given plenty of good presentations in the past.
Exactly. Another distortion is catastrophizing, where you imagine the worst-case scenario in every situation.
So, like, if I get a slightly critical email from my boss, I immediately jump to the conclusion that I'm about to get fired.
Right. And then there's overgeneralization, where you take one negative experience and apply it to everything in your life.
So, like, if I go on one bad date, I conclude that I'm unlovable and I'll never find a partner.
Yep. And there's personalization, where you blame yourself for things that are outside your control.
So, like, if my friend is in a bad mood, I assume it's because I did something wrong.
Right. And finally, there's mind reading, where you assume you know what other people are thinking, usually negatively.
So, like, if someone doesn't smile at me in the hallway, I assume they hate me.
Exactly. These are just a few of the common ways our thinking can get distorted, and those distorted thoughts often fuel our inner critic.
Okay, so now that we know what these distortions are, how do we actually combat them?
Well, Grouder introduces a simple yet powerful technique called catch, check, change. He calls it the CBT Power Trio.
CBT Power Trio. I like it. So how does it work?
So the first step is to catch the negative thought. This goes back to that self-awareness we talked about earlier. You have to be able to recognize when that inner critic is speaking to actually hear those negative thoughts as they're happening.
So it's like becoming aware of the soundtrack in your head.
Exactly. And once you catch the thought, the next step is to check its validity and helpfulness. Grouder provides a few key questions to ask yourself, like, is this thought 100% true? What's the evidence for it? What's the evidence against it? Is it one of those cognitive distortions we just talked about? Is it actually helping me, or is it just making me feel worse? And what would I say to a friend who is having this same thought?
Okay, so we're really putting those negative thoughts on trial.
Exactly. We're challenging them, examining them, and seeing if they hold up under scrutiny.
Yeah.
And often, when we really look at them objectively, those negative thoughts crumble.
Makes sense. So what's the final step?
The final step is to change the thought, to reframe it into something more balanced, realistic, and constructive. And Grouder emphasizes that this doesn't mean turning a negative thought into a ridiculously positive one. It's not about putting on rose-colored glasses and pretending everything is perfect. It's about finding a more accurate and helpful way to think about the situation.
So it's like taking that distorted negative thought and adjusting it so it's more in line with reality?
Exactly. So let's go back to that example of I'm such a failure, I can't do anything right. After catching and checking that thought, you might change it to something like, I made a mistake. And that's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. It doesn't mean I'm a failure. I can learn from this and do better next time.
Okay, that makes sense. It's still acknowledging the mistake, but it's not letting that one mistake define you as a person.
Exactly. And Grouder even suggests a fun exercise called your inner critic's greatest hits.
Inner critic's greatest hits. That sounds interesting.
So the idea is to identify a few of those common negative thoughts that your inner critic loves to play on repeat, and then practice using the catch, check, change technique on them. And once you've reframed those thoughts, write them down somewhere you can easily refer to them. It's like creating a cheat sheet of positive affirmations to combat those negative thought patterns.
Oh, I love that idea. It's like having a toolbox of positive thoughts ready to go whenever that inner critic starts playing its old tunes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, another powerful technique Grouder introduces is the self-compassion response. This one's all about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a friend who's going through a tough time.
Oh, self-compassion. I've heard that's so important, but I'm not always sure how to actually do it.
Yeah, it can be tricky, especially when we're so used to being critical of ourselves. But Grouder draws on the work of Dr. Kristen Neff, who's like the queen of self-compassion research. And she breaks it down into three key components. The first is self-kindness, which is about offering yourself warmth and understanding instead of harsh self-judgment.
So it's about treating yourself like you would treat someone you care about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The second component is common humanity, which is recognizing that everyone struggles and makes mistakes. It's about not feeling alone in your imperfections.
Right, because sometimes it can feel like we're the only ones who mess up, which just makes us feel worse.
Totally. And the third component is mindfulness, which, in this context, is about being present with your difficult emotions without getting swept away by them. It's about acknowledging your pain and suffering without judgment.
Okay, so self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Got it. But how do we actually apply this when that inner critic starts attacking?
Well, Grouder suggests that whenever you notice those critical thoughts coming up, you consciously shift the dialogue. First, acknowledge your suffering. Say to yourself, this is really painful right now, I'm hurting.
Okay, so we're validating our own experience, not trying to push it away.
Exactly. Then remind yourself that you're not alone. Say to yourself, everyone makes mistakes. Everyone feels inadequate sometimes. This is a normal part of being human.
Right, so we're connecting with that sense of shared human experience.
Exactly. And then offer yourself kindness. Ask yourself, what would I say to a friend who is going through this? What words of comfort or encouragement would I offer them? And then speak to yourself with that same kindness and understanding.
That's beautiful. It's like we're becoming our own best friend.
Exactly. And the amazing thing is that self-compassion actually has physiological benefits.
Yeah.
It activates those parts of your brain associated